I've fallen into that trap of feeling like every stressor is so pressing and I have to do it right now, and just learning that pause of, is this pertinent, or like, why am I feeling this, to then help me make the next best decision, right? Versus impulsively feeling it and doing it and missing out on that pause. It's so huge to just pause for literally a millisecond and say, why am I feeling this? Right? And then take the
Yeah.
next step versus just the impulsive action.
Yeah, we want to get out of discomfort, but
Yeah.
if we can linger there with curiosity, can learn a
Mhm.
lot and then make really intentional next steps that are really values aligned. You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Hey, brave OT listeners. I'm Carlin Neek, your guide and partner in this journey of courageous occupational therapy. Today, our guest, Erin, brings together heart and mind as we dive into conversations that challenge norms, embrace unique perspectives, and foster the growth and vitality we strive for every day in our professional and personal lives. I'm beyond excited to welcome Erin Clarelli to the pod. Erin is a force in the world of OT, deeply committed to creating supportive spaces for neurodiverse individuals and empowering other OTs to do so as well. She's here to share her wisdom, insights, and stories that will inspire you to rethink your approach, nourish your passion, and perhaps even spark a little bit of rebellion against the status quo. Where appropriate, I'm grateful that somewhere along Erin's journey toward thought leadership in this space, she chose to join Activate Vitality for the community and support she needed in order to do these brave things she has done. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR. The team at Jane understands that clocking out from the clinic doesn't always mean you're clocking out for the day. Instead, it's often the start of charting long into the evening. With time-saving charting features like custom smart narratives, chart duplication, and dictation, Jane helps you finish charting your patient or client notes during work hours, not after hours. And to save you even more time, you have access to Jane's chart template library. It's fully stocked with pre-made templates that have been generously shared by practitioners in the community. You can even customize them further with charting tools like side-by-side photos and range scales. To see how Jane can help you free up your evenings from admin tasks, head to the show notes to grab the link for your personalized demo. If you're ready to get started, you can use the code VITALITY at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period applied to your new account. It is so nice to see you again. Yeah, seeing your face on the screen makes my heart smile.
I know. It's so nice to reconnect. It feels like the timeline collapses from the last time we spoke, and a different domain that we're speaking in right now. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Oh, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. So for those people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I am an occupational therapist and I own my own business called Sunrise Therapies. My business started as a need to get out of the system of the insurance-based model and being limited on what we could do as OTs with that. And now it's evolved to this. I have a team of 4, 5, including myself, and expanding more and more. There's just things that come across my path that are exciting, and I am a yes woman, and I just say, "Yeah, sure, let's try it, and if it works, cool." I would say I'm all those things, plus I'm a fur mama, a wife, all those things in my personal life, and I'm just a person that loves living and embracing all that comes our way.
I remember first seeing you in a yoga class on a patio in Florida. The sun was behind you, but you were glowing, like, you were, like, clearly radiating this energy that I felt so drawn to you because you just had this calm, kind, humorous, flexible, easygoing nature, and you called out to me, and you knew me, and I was like, "Oh, somebody knows me?" And, like, I'm sitting there admiring you, and you're like, "Hey, Carly."
Yeah. Oh man, it's so interesting because even just you saying that, it's like, oh my gosh, like me on the inside, I was like shaking, right? Like I think of Inside Out. I just went and saw the second one, but I'm like picturing that anxiety just like
Yeah.
bubbling up and me using all my tools to like press that down and step into my confidence. So it
Mhm.
feels really good to hear you say that because the same thing back to you, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that's Carla. Like, perspective is a real wild thing.
Yeah, yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. And yeah, it was a like we were both in kind of new roles at that time, sort of stepping into leading things. This was at the OT Entrepreneur Summit live in, I think, was it November of 2021 or October? Somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were doing some things and I was doing some things and we were totally nervous. I think I shook my papers that I only got halfway through for the whole time I was speaking when I did my talk.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember your talk still. Like, I remember being in the front row just fully captivated by your story. I remember crying at the end. So just all of that. That summit feels like yesterday. And to
Mm.
think that was however many years ago. In
Yeah.
November of 21, I had just started Sunrise in May. It was like in fruition January through May, right? But I really
Yeah.
like bit the bullet, left my full-time job and went for it in May. So yeah, meeting the people there, hearing your talk, and just I'm still connected with many people from that summit. And I'm so
Mm.
grateful for it and just the community we have and the mindset of OTs in general, right? We have such a strong foundation of so many aspects, right? Like with the tagline living life to the fullest, like
Mm.
how do you even focus in on one thing for that? So just the journey of getting to where I'm at now and being surrounded by such incredible OTs, I'm definitely grateful for.
Mhm. I like
Yeah.
how you talked about an OT mindset because I find I'm often asked to talk about mindset and generally, it feels like a little bit icky as a general term, right? That people attach things to it. But I like talking about specific mindsets or specific ways of being and thinking and that sort of thing, like growth mindset or an entrepreneurial mindset or an OT mindset. And what sort of mindset do I need to bring to this situation? It's not necessarily the same for everything.
Yeah.
How would you describe an OT mindset?
Yeah, really great question. I love that you highlight that it ebbs and flows, right? So how I show up as an OT is very different how I show up for my family or stressful experiences in life. I think there are overlap in each of those. But when
Mhm.
I am specifically in my OT mindset, I am very much the first thing that comes to mind is supportive, right? Like I am
Mhm.
here to support. It is seeing the possibility in everything, right? Like people coming to us and saying, I have this goal, I want to do this. And it's like, all right, here, da, da, da. Like in my mind, I just see this list of, okay, here's what we need to do to get there. So it's like open mindedness and believing in oneself, believing in the person that we're serving. Then the last thing that comes to mind is just holistic, right? And
Mhm.
that's a buzzword, and right, it could mean something to you different than it means to
Mhm.
me. But for me, it's really just looking at the mind and how you process and perceive this world and what your beliefs are. The body, what is your nervous system and your regulation like, and how physically adept are you to show up for the challenge we're working towards?
Mhm.
And then spiritually, I think that can mean that absolutely means something different to everyone, but everyone has some connection, whether it's really deep and high thinking, or it's, hey, I know something bigger is out there, or I get feelings, or it's, hey, I don't believe in anything, I just believe in life. So I think all of that is so important. And I think that comes from our schooling. Like I remember studying for my boards and being like, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember this? I feel like I was like a psychologist, a nurse, like all
Mhm.
these like different domains. So I think as much as that was killer when I was studying, I am so grateful to have that background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
It's
curious if do you think of any of those words came up or different things come up for you for OT mindset?
think so. And I really like how you talked about your unique way of showing up. That this isn't just how OTs show up. This is my flavor, my values, my
Mhm.
stamp, my way of seeing the world and my clients and my role. And all of that was encompassed in that description. So I love that.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm going to two things like a OT mindset generally and my own, but I'll come at it with my own for starters. And my work is twofold, right? So I know you know this, but listeners may not know I have a private practice with which is mostly adult mental health. And I have a program called Activate Vitality where I mentor and support OTs. They're therapy business owners, but it just happens to be that mostly OTs join. And I feel like I show up fairly similar in both of those roles. I'm not an OT when I'm working with people internationally. It's a different relationship, but still, I feel like I'm showing up with a sense of curiosity and openness and flexibility. Also, similar to the way you've described seeing possibility, that sense of I can see what they can't, and they're in a spot where it's hard to see possibility. And it's great to be able to be that visionary for them and be able to talk about what's important and where they want to get to and building that bridge between here and there. That kind of is
Mhm.
our activity analysis and assessing the person and the situation and the occupations and all of that sort of thing. And then seeing what needs to be built to get over here. When you're in that hurting spot, you tend to think there's here or there. There's not, they can't see the middle very often. A lot of my
Yeah.
mental health clients in particular. And so I love that sense of being that person who sees possibility, but also really tunes in with the individual and listens and creates safety and space where they can feel comfortable to show up as they are with whatever is present. So I work really hard. Actually, I put a lot of time and effort into establishing that safe relationship, but it actually isn't hard. Like it's a thing that comes naturally. Like I couldn't imagine another way. So it's a priority, I guess, is probably what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really resonates. Something that I didn't add about myself is I work specifically with the non-speaking, minimally speaking, or unreliably speaking autistic community. So that safety is so huge. And just even hearing you talk about how you assess and gather information, right? It's a discussion, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
some of these majority of these guys and gals don't have a voice yet to share that, right? It's a lot of like intuitive thinking and experiences, leaning into parents, and the whole family has been through a lot of experiences. A lot of the families that come to me right now are teens, like teens to young adults. So they've
Mhm.
been through a system that didn't believe in them, didn't do all these things about that OT mindset, right? Like
Yeah.
they didn't look at them holistically. They didn't believe in them. They didn't assess their mental health and how we can support them
Mm.
in all those areas. So it's just for me that safety and that neuroception of safety and building that is so huge. I think about that so heavily in my work. But then if I just go out and hang out with family or friends, I'm not thinking about it as much. So it's interesting to hear you say working collaboratively with other OTs. I'm
Mhm.
just authentically myself. I'm not like clinically thinking about how can I build this safety, right? I'm hoping I'm presenting that and I hope it's like a neat thing in me. But when I am serving my families and my clients, I am very intentional with like my body placement, my words, because their life has been surrounded in the opposite, a
Mhm.
neuroception of unsafety and threat.
How did you go about learning that? Because I imagine some of that is innately how you show up, knowing you,
Mhm,
having spent a
mhm.
lot of time with you. But I find it helpful to learn what it is that I do naturally that works. And
Yeah,
then, right, like that
for
education is
sure.
affirming. And then also knowing that there's things that I do that, ooh, that could be received in not the way that's intentional. So sometimes I
Yeah.
can cross my arms and I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that's not the body language. I want to have an open posture here, right? And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel like my favorite like CEU courses are the ones where I'm like, oh yeah, I've been doing that. That makes sense, right? I've been doing it, but now I have this evidence-based information behind it.
Yeah.
But I do think I learned it with my work, honestly, for what felt safe for me and going through my own healing journey and learning what felt regulating for my body and then exploring that within my sessions. And then honestly, just doing things and seeing the reaction from the individual because it's different for everyone. Yes, there's like uniform ones of crossing our arms or just general body language, but even learning, and this goes back to a lot of the work that I'm being led to for OT specifically, learning how to really truly regulate myself so that I could be a strong co-regulation partner for these individuals that their bodies are their arousal spikes and it could feel scary for our nervous system. Even though in our minds we know it's not intentional or they're not truly like wanting to do the things they're doing, it still feels scary to our nervous system. So I think just doing the work over and over, trial and error, exploring, working collaboratively. The individuals I serve are the best teachers. I get the
Mhm.
best feedback from how their body responds, or those that do have a voice through alternative communication have shared
Mm.
specific ways to be supportive for this community.
And it's interesting when you think about the autistic population as well, where sometimes if you're working with somebody who wasn't autistic, you might be seeking to be more direct in the connection, where that could feel really dysregulating depending on the person you're working with. So creating safety by creating a bit of distance can also, depending on the situation, I imagine. I'm not the expert in that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, again, I feel like we cannot say it enough, right? That each individual person
Yeah.
is individual for a reason.
Yeah.
But I will say that sometimes it is just time and space, but in conjunction with that, it is like affirming and age appropriate language in those moments in OT school and in my field work and my first jobs. I was taught to just turn everything off when someone gets dysregulated, reduce all sensory stimuli, which, yeah, makes sense to some extent for the nervous system. But how alone does that feel if everyone just shuts off when your body's losing it and is in fight or flight and it's just they're sitting around? And so many individuals will sit like with arms crossed or hands like down at their waist in this like wide stance, almost like a security guard,
Mm.
right? That for me previously in the school systems and in outpatient clinic settings, that's what we were taught to do. Shut up and just wait. I will say that space and time has been great, but I don't stand like that and I don't stay completely quiet. I'll write on a whiteboard and say, I am safe here. I can trust my body. This will pass. Or I'll like model deep breaths, or I'll say those things in a gentle voice and I'll sit down on the ground with them. Right. So it is individualized based on the arousal level and the safety needs of the individual and myself and whoever else is there. But I don't think always space or distance is good because that feels isolating. Like you're too scared to come near me. And now, oh my gosh, I did this. And then that spiral that we have spoken about in our work, I have this here. Because
Uh-huh.
I was looking back at all my notes from when I took your course. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so full circle. And I'm
Yeah.
just, all the work is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. For the people who are listening and
Oh,
don't see what Erin just held up, it was her Activate Vitality planner from when she joined the Activate Vitality program at the end of 2021. And yeah, it was fun to be able to work with you for that next season. But
yeah.
yeah, really neat. So, one of the things that's transitioned recently is you're
Mm,
doing more educating and mentoring other therapists. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But here, the little link I'm thinking is a lot of what you're doing, you've learned skillfully, but you're also doing intuitively.
mm.
How are you teaching that to new clinicians?
Yeah. So right now, my focus of my work is specifically for clinicians, specifically OT. We'll see if that expands about this population and
Mhm.
how I am so grateful for my OT degree. And in the same breath, I am frustrated with the schooling around this specific topic, and I want to change that. And that's where this fire came from for me. I will say that my focus is definitely on mindset because we need to change our beliefs and what we've been told and what society has been told as a whole about this
Mhm.
community,
Mhm.
right? And it is really hard to change that belief when we are seeing these individuals' bodies act out in a way that is from a nervous system response, fight or flight, right?
Yep.
Freeze, shut
Yep.
down, all of that. The beginning and the end of my coursework and my mentorship is on mindset. So it is a lot of journaling and reflecting of just like, hey, where are you at right now?
Mhm.
I run through some questions, same questions that I asked myself when I entered this community, and I saw that these individuals had so much in them and understanding the mind body disconnect and apraxia and all the things we know through
Mhm.
TBI and stroke, but we don't connect to this community.
Right.
And then I go through all the coursework explaining all that and connecting the dots that OT schools should be connecting and will be in the future.
Maybe.
And then at the end, I go through, okay, here are the same or similar questions. How are you feeling now that we've connected some of these dots, right? Where is your mindset at? How are you going to continue to carry this out?
Mhm.
Because I'm guilty of it too, of going through a CEU course, learning it, being jazzed on all the information, and then going right back to old patterns, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of self-reflection, questions, learning in between to see the growth, and then follow-up mentorship for accountability and just strategies like I've learned in your course too, and just
Mm,
learned through my own self-development and all the courses I've taken and the therapy I've done, right, and continue to
mhm,
do
mhm.
in terms of tiny, consistent steps day by day. So that's how right now, then it
Yeah.
evolves. Every new self-help book I'm learning for myself, I am integrating into my mentorship for someone else because it might resonate and maybe they don't have time to read that whole book. So here's my bite-sized chunk of what I learned in this book. Let's try it.
I like how you've structured that because I find a lot of OTs I talk to really crave signing up for more and more CEUs and more courses, and do you send out the recordings and that sort of thing. And the real magic actually happens in the conversations and the reflections and the troubleshooting and the, hey, this thing happened and I tried this. And that's where lots of really good learning happens. Certainly modules and textbooks and learning are valuable. Like we take in a lot of information, but when it comes to transformation, I find in those more relational kind of engagements, community or
Yes.
individual. Yeah. And you've
Yeah.
structured it for that. I know there's lots of content to even say on there, like information dense, I think was listed on your thing. OTs want to see that for sure. And, but we have to do all this other stuff or else it's going nowhere.
Hmm. Yeah. And I remember actually going through your coursework. It's so funny. One specific thought is standing in my head. I remember like folding laundry in the laundry room and like listening to your coursework and being like, oh my gosh, I got to pause that and rewind. It was like, I was so invested in it because it had all those aspects too, right? Like you have the community and the time to meet and discuss with you. So I was way more invested in the coursework because I knew, not that I had to, right? But I was committing to coming to those sessions and then discussing, okay,
Mhm.
what's going on for you now and how does this tie into everything we've been talking about? So
Yeah.
that made me invest in it more than just let me just listen to this on 2 times the speed while I'm driving.
Yes. Yeah.
There's just different levels. And again, full circle, depending on when you're listening to a course, you may choose to do 2 times the speed because you feel so stressed and you're just trying to check things off your list. But what good is that doing, right? Like, sure, you may grab 2 or 3 little key points, but are you going to implement and see the real change and then be able to connect on a deep level with the others in the community that are also doing similar work?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a key.
And social learning, I feel like it's just such almost a learning hack, right? But it's
Yeah.
I don't use the term hack a lot, but that sense of being in community with each other, we just naturally want to grow and learn in similar ways, right? So if you're in community with other people who are learning the same thing, or somebody's talking out their thing that they're working on, that we're learning that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just this way of absorbing it socially. That's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing other people's perspectives, right? Like
Mhm.
you may go through coursework and someone shares like, "Oh, I perceived it this way," or "I'm implementing it this way," and you didn't even think of that. And you're like, "Oh, I need to try that." Versus again, just listening to a webinar that was recorded and calling it a day. Yeah, and maybe that's as OTs, I think that's a clear skill that we have of that full picture, the full understanding and the true passion and wanting for the people we are serving, like seeing their potential and wanting them to take it further than just listening and getting their 4 credits for licensure.
Yes.
So,
I liked that when I was looking through your pages, you address that sort of thing, right? And similarly, I'm not listed with any sort of, I serve people internationally. I can't possibly register what I do with all of the different regulatory bodies that people might join from. And I'm also a little bit resistant to the whole idea that we need to structure our learning for our learning needs, for our
mhm,
professional and personal growth, and take responsibility and accountability for that learning. And I'm a bit miffed by regulatory systems that require you to only do this many CEUs from a list because I don't think that meets the intention of continuing education in any way. But I also
yeah,
recognize that these are systems that we're working in. It's similar to both of us leaving healthcare system too, right? It's
yeah,
I get it. There's this system. I get how I relate to that. It's a little bit different because these are my values. This is how
yeah.
I approach education and mentorship support and come if this fits for you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think of myself as like a rebellious person. I mean, maybe as a teenager, right? Like reflecting back. But I feel like it's funny. We had gone to Disney and I was pointing out all my favorite characters, and my husband was like, "You always like the underdog. Like you like the little sidekick. I love like Hey Hey or Groot. I like all the little not main characters." And I was like, I think he actually pointed it out. He was like, "And that's kinda telling for the work you do, like, you're always trying to help that person that's in the back scene, right? And you're there to advocate and do the fight with them." So I think, like, both in my work with the autistic population and just work with OTs, it's I don't want to be that person that's, screw the system," you know?
No, no.
But it's like not but, I always say one of my good colleagues has taught me "but and," right? It could be both. You don't have to negate the thing before. It could be that, like, I'm so passionate about OTs and the work we do
Mhm.
that I see us being the best people to be serving the community that I serve in this way, right? Because we have all this background, and I feel like it's a disservice that we aren't being taught it earlier on, right? So it's same thing with the accreditation or the healthcare system that they're not approving OT to be done with these individuals I serve because they're aged out or they're not going to make progress, right? So it's we are advocating for a better future as a whole for OT and the communities we serve, even if it feels uncomfortable or a little bit scary. It's important. And I think if there's one thing I've learned through my entrepreneur journey is like when it feels scary or I get that feeling in my stomach, like I did before this
Mhm.
podcast, those are the things you should be doing. Yes, balancing them with the things that feel like, relax and neuroception safety, but building that resiliency in yourself, in those that you serve in a comfortable way,
Mhm.
and noticing in your body when you feel that and noticing what that means and what to do next
Mhm.
is so huge. And if that means that you're going to be pushing against something that you once were like, oh, I need to follow this. I remember being a new grad and be like, oh, I have to like follow exactly everything to a T. But if you're passionate about it, you're passionate for a reason. So
Yeah.
my message is to follow it and trust.
Yeah. That when that fear comes up, tuning into the difference between a fear that is truly like we shouldn't do that.
Protective. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's tricky because our nervous system is being protective when we're feeling fearful about expanding into something new, but being able to discern that difference between moving in an intentional way and experiencing the fear of change versus the other way. And so being able to embrace that, yes, when I grow, when I expand into something new and I care about it deeply, I do get nervous. I do experience fear. I do experience self doubt. And that's actually to be expected and part of the journey anytime I expand into something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I always use the term nerve sighted or like reframing fear like excitement or momentum to do the next thing. So that's been something I've been working on with my therapist in the past probably 3 months of running a business isn't easy, you know this, and the pressure we put on ourselves as caring and giving individuals. I've fallen into that trap of feeling like every stressor is so pressing and I have to do it right now, and just learning that pause of, "Is this pertinent?" Or like, "Why am I feeling this?" To then help me make the next best decision, right? Versus impulsively feeling it and doing it and missing out on that pause. It's so huge to just pause for literally a millisecond and say, "Why am I feeling this?" Right? And then take the
Yeah.
next step versus just the impulsive action.
Yeah. We want to get out of discomfort. But
Yeah.
if we can linger there with curiosity, can learn a
Mhm.
lot and then make really intentional next steps that are really values aligned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I have a question that just came from who knows where for
Oh.
you about the word or the phrase self-care, because
Mm.
I have my perspective on it
Mhm.
and just like the self-care movement. So I'm curious, what does that mean to you?
So I feel like it's one of those words that have been a little bit like things have been attached to it, right? And so the true essence of caring for one's self is so much deeper than we automatically think of when somebody says self care. Super easy for someone to go, oh, I need to do more self care. Okay, maybe I'll book a massage and a nail appointment and have some bubble baths. Cool, if that's what you need. Is that deeply caring for your person as a a whole entity, right? And what does your soul need, right? What does your body need? What does your spirit need? Like I feel like it's so much deeper. And if not grounded in self compassion, might be a bit superficial. And so I've done a couple talks around shifting that kind of superficial self-care toward deeper, really focusing on self-compassion, and out of self-compassion grows acts of self-care. Because I think self-care is generally the act of caring, like it's what
Mhm.
are the actions, the occupations that are aligned with caring for oneself. But if it's not grounded in having compassion for yourself, that's maybe where the real work needs to happen.
Yeah, I love that you separated to the surface level self-care because I do think, like, when I say self-care, even in my mind, like, the first thing that pops up is a bubble bath, like,
Yeah.
visually in my mind. So, I totally agree that there's 2 different types. There's this deeper awareness and finding space and connecting with what self-care actually feels like and is bringing to you as a whole being. And I recognize how much work it takes to get to that deeper level self-care, right? I think I know from my own experience that self-care can be eh, self-deprecating, right? You could
Mm.
be like, I'm just gonna drink a glass of wine and sit in a bathtub and everything will be fine, right? Because I don't truly want to see what's inside, right? Or it could go so deep where it's, I'm just gonna sit and meditate and do nothing all day for 2 weeks, right? So it's I think there's this continuum of it that it could be, like, way superficial,
Mhm.
or it could be like you're limiting yourself by saying, "Oh, I'm doing self-care. I'm really" like, I love woo-woo, don't get me wrong, but I think woo-woo can take us to a point where we're just avoiding,
Yeah.
right? So it's like everything, right? There's like a sweet spot for everyone, and that might look different. For me, it's that I would be like, I'm going to meditate and do yoga, and everything's going to be great. And I don't need to have a to do list. I don't need a schedule. And then my world falls apart. I'm just going to go with the flow. Like for me as an entrepreneur, running multiple things out of my business, right? That just didn't work for me. But the other end didn't work where I worked really, really hard. And then for a weekend, I would do no work and drink wine and sit in a bathtub or get my nails done, right?
Mhm.
I found the ebb and flow of doing both, right? Because
Yeah.
there's some days like yesterday where I was just like grind, grind, grind. Whereas
Yeah.
today I'm like, I'm chatting with you. This doesn't feel like work. So I think holding ourselves accountable is a big piece in it as well. And not letting it this like having compassion for ourselves be another excuse to avoid. I think there's also you got to call yourself out, right? Hey, you're bullshit right now and you need to just go do the thing, right?
Yeah.
I-
And different acts can represent different needs at different times, right? I could be like, "Hey, I am exhausted today. I'm gonna have popcorn for
Mhm.
supper and maybe a sparkling water. And that's not gonna be my everyday, but that's today. And that
Yeah.
could be a good thing today. If that became my habit for the rest of the month, I'm not nourishing myself. I'm not caring for
Exactly.
myself. And yeah, it's
Mhm.
sort of seeing our we in supporting our needs and tuning into what we need in any given moment. Like a bubble bath truly could be an act of
Mhm.
kindness and self-care if that's where you're needing to pause, you're needing to
Yeah.
break the routine. You're like,
Mm.
I sometimes meditate in the bath, like for 3 minutes or something like that, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
I have some essential oils that I love, and it's just like this representation of slowing down in my routine and caring for myself. But that could be a whole different vibe if it's just, yep, self-care, check. I had a bath and
Yeah.
whatever. I listened to my modules for the course I'm doing the same
Yes.
time. And
Yep.
yeah.
So true. Yeah,
Yeah.
spot on. Even just last week, I had a super stressful week and my body was hurting. I took a lot of Epsom salt baths, but they were not self-care baths. They were like survival baths. Let me get in here so my body feels good. Let me sit on my phone and scroll. It wasn't like, let me connect with myself. And you know what? That's what I needed in that moment. I needed to like mentally check out and let my body do its thing and healing. And that's a new day, a new week. So
Totally.
yeah,
A
thanks for
a
sharing that.
a girlfriend of mine taught me that a popcorn bowl will actually float in the bathtub.
That's a game changer.
Oh, no.
Wow. All right, I'll test it. I'll let you know how mine goes. That's great.
So
Uh,
I would love to hear more about what you've been really passionate about building in these last several over the last year, but you really launched into it the last quarter.
Yeah. Like I said, I started my clinical work. We are a mobile OT practice in Southern California where we provide, it's evolved. Yeah, I guess it evolved because at first you're just grabbing whoever you can see, right? Now it's very specifically for this non-speaking community. And I just attracted so many amazing therapists. And I had no idea it would ever be this way where I am reaching families all across America, across the globe, where I can't do it all as myself. Whereas that was my game plan. I was like, I'm just going to go do this thing for myself and the community. From there, I just realized I cannot do this even just within Sunrise. Even if I grew to like a great big corporate business, which I will never do, I will grow and continue to serve, but I will never sell out. I'm like, let me see where I could teach OTs that are already in this world and feeling similarly to how I felt right before I left my full-time comfortable job.
Yeah.
And instead of so many OTs that I mentor just locally that I've had as like fieldwork students or volunteers, they graduate and then they start their first job and then they hop to the next, they hop to the next because they're just having the same challenges because the autistic community is growing.
Yeah.
We don't really know why or what, but there are so many more autistic individuals that need to be served. And OT is a huge service provider for that, understandably so, right? I think so many people, even myself, I went into this career. I was like, I love kids. I love working with this population, but I was so stifled by what I was taught in OT school of how to address it, honestly, in conjunction with insurance and all the stuff we spoke about. So that has led me to want to advocate to change the schooling and like the coursework that we're having.
Mhm.
Not completely obliterate it, right? There's some really good information in there, but add to it, enrich it with the new knowledge we have from the individuals we are serving. Like they are the best teachers. So I can't go right in and become a professor and change every curriculum. So I wanted to start with OTs that are already doing this work and feeling the same way and remind them that, hey, you don't need to give up on this career. I can't tell you how many on Facebook groups, I'm sure you see it too, of, hey, I'm thinking about leaving the OT profession. And it's, oh, that breaks my heart for multiple reasons. But I do know a lot of OTs that are like, I just can't reach my clients, or I have no idea how to get them regulated, and my sensory diets aren't working. They want me to work on fine motor in school. So I was like, this is just mind blowing that this is still happening. And so I started the coursework of, hey, if you're feeling this way, if deep down in your gut, intuitively, that there is something more for the
Yeah.
individuals that you're serving that you love and care about, but you are just feeling out of alignment because you weren't set up with the tools
Yeah.
and you're working in this space that isn't presuming competence and we just got to crank them out for insurance. We don't care what you do in your sessions. Here's someone that went through that, right? I'm here to hear you out, see where you're at, give you what I've learned to get me to this point of feeling so fulfilled in my work. I still will see 8 clients in a day and feel my body is exhausted, but my heart is so full. And that is very different than your body being exhausted and your heart being conflicted morally, right? Because I have to do it this way because the red tape in the school district, or I have to do it this way because I had no time to prep for my clients, you know? So, yeah, my main focus right now is just getting the information out there to OTs because we are such makers of change, right? And once we find things, I feel like we all get really passionate and we are helping. And I think it could have a huge ripple effect across the globe that I can't have with just me and my team here. That's a long
Wow.
answer.
That is a good answer, though. You are truly doing your soul's work. Working with the individuals, I know, is powerful, and you'll never not do that, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
you can help so many more people if you can empower these therapists who need to know how to do what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just a word that popped into my mind is ego too, right? I could sit here and be like, I'm going to do this all on my own because I can't trust people because I've been broken in the past, right? But there's, again, full circle to what we're talking about. There's so much power in community and connection and understanding. And the families they're dying for this. If they don't know that this community and these professionals that are out there yet,
Mhm.
they are like in at home alone thinking, I wish someone would just see my son as I see him, or I would truly presume competence or be truly neurodiversity affirming. Again, all buzzwords, but what does that mean? And how do we really speak to these individuals and their families in a way that no one else ever has because the system hasn't taught us to do that?
Mm.
It's taught us all these other beliefs that we need to get rid of and reprogram.
So, what are the main things that you are trying to shift people away from? Things that we learned, and what are some of the biggies
Yeah.
that we need to reprogram?
Yes, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
My first thing, I would say that we were taught that autism is a cognitive disorder. We know autism is a spectrum, specifically in this community where they used to be labeled as low functioning, right? But now we say high support needs, right? That they are not intelligent, that they have cognitive delays or intellectual disabilities, that they don't understand what we're saying. Whereas I would reprogram all that to they have a body that is not cooperating with their mind. And as a yoga teacher and doing yoga for myself, mind body connection is so big. But for this community, it is so much deeper of how do we truly get their bodies to cooperate with their minds. And then the other aspect is that it is behavioral. How many families or how many IEPs with a BIP, a behavior intervention plan?
Yeah.
I don't even use that word, right? It is a trigger word for me. Yes, we all have behaviors, right? Like that, how we behave. But for me, it's just motor actions that their body is doing because their nervous system is either triggered or that it is a stuck pattern. Just like we see spoken loops of saying the same movie script over and over, the body does the same thing. Changing that the intellect isn't there because it is there and they
Mhm.
are truly wanting to learn and they don't want to be drilled, say ball, because apraxia doesn't discriminate. It's in the mouth, it's in the whole body. And that they are not being behavioral. They are not intentionally trying to harm you or harm themselves or ignore what you're asking them to do. It is that their body won't listen to their brain. That's a
Wonderful.
cliff note, yeah. And then we layer in sensory and trauma and, how does that all correlate? And just the simplest shift of speaking to a 32-year-old autistic male, like a 32-year-old male, is huge. And how much could that balance out regulation and help their nervous system feel safe instead of truncating our language or talking about him in front of him, all of that.
Yeah. And I imagine in the less verbal autistic people you work with, that's even more, that people are often not getting their cues for how to interact with this person from the person
Mhm.
verbally, and therefore making all
Yeah,
sorts of assumptions and interact.
assumptions.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and I even highlight that the verbal word. I'm such a
Yeah.
stickler for words in this community.
Yeah.
Ask my side note, my really great friend, she helps me out with some social media, so she'll write things and I change it all the time, and she's, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "I know I'm a pain in the butt, but"
It's
um,
important. The words are
yeah.
important.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say this community is very verbal because verbal is language, right? They understand language. They have language in their mind. They just aren't speaking. They
Speaking.
understand verbal language, right? They are verbal in their mind. They just cannot get their mouth to say what their brain is saying.
That's a huge
Um,
distinction. Thank you for correcting
yeah.
me. Yeah,
Yeah. Of
totally.
course, we're always learning, right?
Absolutely.
And I will highlight that it differs for everyone, right? You just gotta
Yeah.
ask, do you prefer me to refer to it as autistic or a person with autism, right?
Yeah.
It's individualized, but I think, again, just opening that space to ask that question is huge.
Those are really important shifts. So for people, OTs who want to connect with what you have to offer, how should they
Mm.
find you? How would they find that information?
Yeah, definitely. My OT focused area is otlevelup.com. And that has all my offerings and just like a little more into me and my style and my kind of, I call it my no BS approach. I just say it as it is. I keep it real. I'm an open book. And then on Instagram is mainly where I'm the most active. So Erin.Clarelli or just Erin Clarelli. I don't even know.
I'll link it in the show notes
Yes.
accurately. Yes.
Thank you. And then my clinical work is sunrise therapies. So if you want to learn there, I post a lot of like clinical based learning there, whereas my other Erin Clarelli is like lifestyle, mindset work, all
Yeah.
of that stuff. But yeah, I would love to connect, even just to jump on a call. Like I am so passionate about making this ripple effect, and there's no ego involved. If I could sit and talk with you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes and make a change, I'm here to do it. So
Mm.
let's
Uh,
make it
yeah.
happen.
Oh, I love the
Yeah,
integrity in that. Yeah.
yeah,
We
yeah.
we often get coaching when we're doing something more entrepreneurial about different ways of don't coach on a call, like a clarity
Mhm.
call. You need to leave them feeling the pain basically so that
Yeah,
they'll
yeah,
buy. And it's, oh my gosh, if the person's situation can be solved in
yeah,
a quick conversation, I'm happy to do that.
yeah,
They are not the ideal client for the bigger thing I have to offer. Let's make a
exactly.
difference.
Yeah, like, why withhold anything? Yeah, it feels so icky, and I think, again, that's why the community that we've connected with and built with like-minded entrepreneurs that are like, I'm not gonna use that sales technique. Nope, I'm just gonna be myself. I'm gonna give what I can and help
Yeah.
support people where everyone is at a different stage, both financially and time-wise. Not everyone can commit to an 8-hour course that really requires some inner work. So let's just give some tips to make change right now and maybe in the future, but maybe they don't need it. Maybe the path leads them to a place where they discover it themselves.
Mhm. Love
Yeah.
that. I have a few questions that I ask everybody at the end. Are you
Okay.
ready for those? What does being brave mean to you?
Mm. I think I touched on this, but doing the thing when it's scary and maybe goes against what the majority believes. But if you truly believe it in your heart and your soul, just trust and go for it, especially, hopefully, if it's for good.
Especially for good.
Yeah.
And what's something brave you've done recently?
I got on this podcast.
Yes, you should.
It did feel brave. But let me think if there's anything else. I did last week. I do a lot of work with other organizations, hopping in and out. And sometimes that could feel scary to step into a space where a team is already established. Like you're connected with them, but you're not there in the daily. So last week I had went in and did like an intensive therapy week with that group that is always so welcoming and supportive, but it feels really scary to just like, plop into this world that's been going on without you. Um, and it's in a world that I highly respect and value. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I showed up each day that week and I gave my best and I felt like I made an impact. So
Mm,
let's say that too.
that sounds really meaningful.
Yeah, definitely was.
And what would you like to see OTs get a little bit more brave about?
Mm. Challenging the norm, stepping out of our box that we put ourselves in or that the system puts us in, especially for pediatrics and school-based. Advocate for that kid that has sensory needs, but may not fully qualify for an IEP.
Yeah.
Share what's on your heart in IEP meetings. Don't be afraid to speak up because you're on the other side of the table, quotation marks. In the insurance base, advocate for more clinical time to prep and provide quality care. Don't just take it and feel like that's all you can do.
Mm.
So yeah, just step outside of the box and challenge what the system thinks of us as OTs, especially in the population I've been discussing.
And I usually ask at this stage how people can connect with you. So you've already said your Instagram, Erin Clarelli. I'll put the link exactly as it's so people can click on that in the
Thank you.
show notes. And your website, you mentioned also otlevelup.com. And if people want to connect with Sunrise and you're open to people booking a chat with you and you just see where it goes from there.
Yeah, definitely. The Sunrise is actually
Mm,
sunrisetherapies.inc.com.
perfect. Thank you.
The other one was taken. So yeah, and both those sites will connect you to a way to book a call with me or just
Yeah.
email me, whatever it is, DM me, all the cool ways to connect that the kids are saying. Find me, I'll chat.
I have a question about that doesn't fall in with my last few questions, but I'm on a lot of Facebook groups with neurodiverse OTs
Mhm.
and seeing a lot of struggles with being in placements where their needs aren't being accommodated or understood, and they're not sure how to advocate, and whether that's students or new clinicians. Is that a group that you're connecting with?
Not specifically OTs. We
Okay.
do have a handful of like late diagnosed autism or ADHD in my clinical work, but we're doing similar things in terms of lifestyle redesign. One of my therapists is trained in that is really amazing. So yeah, I think it could overlap. Right now, no, the path hasn't led me directly there, but maybe it will. Who knows?
Seems
Question.
to be a big gap there. Like, I'm seeing it
Yeah.
as a gap. I have ADHD, and I've been able to make my business work for me, and I'm seeing where these clinicians at these stages in placement, and early career, and it doesn't have to be like it can be a struggle at any point, but
Yeah.
experiencing employers that don't get it. And then the irony being that as OTs, we should be the most accommodating for differences. And that's seeming to be not the case for these autistic OTs in particular.
Yeah, that's a really interesting experience. And I do speak a lot, again, pushing the norms of, I think as employers, there's definitely, you need to hear your employees, right? And their needs, and you need to help them feel seen, heard, and supported.
Yeah.
And I think of ADHD and how it's so overdiagnosed in youth. Yes, our society, I could go on a whole nother tangent with ADHD in youth, but I think we need to be really careful about how we're supporting the neurodiversity community and late diagnoses, and really supporting the narrative of we all have challenges and there's different levels of support. So in the community that I support, there has been frustration of being undervalued with their diagnoses because there's such an influx of so many more lower quote unquote support needs being diagnosed or self-diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
So I want to encourage anyone listening that if you are concerned or you are feeling that any of these neurodiversity diagnoses are part of your being, right? Go to a skilled clinician, right? Really find out more about yourself. And I want to highlight that while also honoring that, yeah, there are a lot of late diagnoses and people that have gone through really rough experiences because they didn't know this is what was happening. And that
Yeah.
comes back to that employer lens of we have 90% of our workforce that is saying, I need these accommodations. How do we operate, right? And how do we accommodate everyone? So I wanted to highlight that of
Yeah.
protecting those that do really need the support and really working clinically with someone that could help you find the supports that are most effective and don't really drill down the employer. Don't take advantage of the system is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And it's hard to
Yeah.
get a diagnosis too. It's
Yeah.
hard to get those appointments and
True.
or be referred on if your primary provider isn't buying it or
Yeah.
things
Is it
like that.
validating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many obstacles and yeah, figuring out how to do our best. But I think it comes down to what are our individual needs. Like no diagnosis comes with a list of
Yeah.
accommodations, right? And what do you need? How do you ask for that? How do you ask for what you need within a situation, or how can you stretch and build your capacity in an area where that's possible? And then sometimes not every job's a good fit for us too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So very true.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here. I am really excited to see you at this stage in your journey. It was so wonderful to work with you a couple of years ago, and I'm glad you reached out now as you're blossoming into new things.
Thank you for all the continued work you do and creating this that keeps my life organized. I'm holding up the planner again. Yeah, this has been really great. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Brave OT podcast. I hope you found our conversation as inspiring and thought provoking as I did. Remember, growth comes from challenging the norm and embracing our unique paths with integrity and compassion. If you enjoyed today's episode, I invite you to please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you insightful discussions and inspiring guests. And don't forget to connect with Erin on Instagram and check out her offerings at otlevelup.com. If you would like to be surrounded by a community of OTs who can help you do big, brave things like Erin has, please reach out to me. I accept new people into Activate Vitality approximately quarterly. So sometime in the new year, I will be opening the doors again. So I would love to chat with you if this is something you think will help you in 2025. Stay curious, be kind, and remember, you are making a difference. I'm Carlin Neek, and this is the Brave OT podcast. As always, be brave, OTs.